All right, ladies and gentlemen, for those up here, I use that term loosely. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council, June 3rd, 2019, to order. Up first, Pastor Steve, would you like to lead us in invocation?
Father, we just come before you thanking you for your goodness and grace. And Lord, it's been a time of Memorial Day weekend and the city's been packed. And Lord, we thank you for your protection, and we want to pause a moment and just thank you for all those who served to make it possible, Lord, for this time. And Lord, I lift up our emergency forces here, Lord, that watch over us and guide us. I pray for each of these council members, giving their time and their efforts. And Lord, we just need your wisdom. Things are not getting easier in this world. And Lord, you said that would happen. But you're the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So, Lord, we know that you know all things, and we pray that you would impart that wisdom to us. And, Lord, that we can be worthy of the call that you've called us to. And I just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
First up today is the agenda approval. Is there any council members that have anything to add or subtract to the today's agenda? No, nobody's speaking, so I guess we're good to go. I'll entertain a motion.
So I'll make that motion, Mayor. Second.
I got a motion second. Let me get my little button out. Okay, now it's not one to, I guess maybe, let's go. Sorry about that, folks. There we go. Ayes have it, so moved. All right, up next, we'll have our first proclamation. Approval of minutes, April 15th, 2019.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Is there any comment about those minutes? Seeing none? So moved. Joey, come on up. All right. A proclamation for Code Enforcement Officers Appreciation Week. You don't get very many appreciation days, let alone a whole week.
No, sir.
Whereas code enforcement officers provide for the safety, health, and welfare of the citizens in this community through the enforcement of building, zoning, housing, animal control, fire safety, environmental, and other codes and ordinances. And whereas code enforcement officers are often not credited for the jobs that they do in saving lives and improving neighborhoods. And whereas every day, assisted by support and program staff, they attempt to provide quality customer service to the public for the betterment of the community. And whereas too many times their efforts go unnoticed, even after code compliance has been accomplished due to their efforts and expertise. And whereas code enforcement officers are dedicated, well-trained, and highly responsible individuals who take their job seriously and are proud of their department and the local government of which they serve. And whereas the Florida Association of Court Enforcement, FACE, has declared the first week of June to be set aside by local governments to honor and recognize their code enforcement officers. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Gary Jarvis, on behalf of the Destin City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of June 3rd through the 7th, 2019, as Code Enforcement Officers Appreciation Week. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Would you like to say anything to the public?
Nope.
All right. Thank you so much, Joey. Thankless job, to say the least. Who's going to hit this one up, Kyle? You? Proposed change the City of Destin election date from March to November, Okaloosa County Supervisor election. Do you want to make that statement, and we'll introduce Paul?
Yes, Mayor. At the last council meeting, Kim Kopp and I presented our memorandum to the City Council at your direction. You had directed us to investigate certain election-related issues, essentially whether Destin could or could not move its election day from a date in March to a date in November. Kim Kopp and I concluded that you can do that if you so wish, and to do that, you'll need to pass an ordinance. Since then, Mr. Lux has requested that he speak to y'all about some of the practical matters, and so if you could, just call Mr. Paul Lux up.
All right. Mr. Paul Lux, please come up forward. Hit the red button and smile. You're on TV.
Feel a little overdressed, actually, but that's all right.
You're in Destin, and it's summertime.
Well, it for sure feels overdressed out there, I can promise you. But at least your lawyer and I look similar, so that's good news. So let me start by talking about some historical perspective for how we ended up where we are today. So Destin passed Resolution 91-11 back in April of 1991. That resolution was to provide support from the City of Destin to move the election from where it was to where it is now and help create what we called in that document a universal municipal election day, which is to say, let's get all of the municipalities in the county, save one, I won't mention their name, Niceville, doing all of their elections on the same day, the second Tuesday in March. That way, all the voters will always know municipal elections are all in the same time at the same place. For Destin, it was a bonus because once every 4 years we have the presidential preference primary in that even-numbered year, which means your cost for the election is very minimal, i.e., your cost is just the cost of legal advertising because I already have to open the polling places, I have to staff them, I have to provide ballots, etc. for the presidential preference primary, essentially giving you guys, unfortunately for the folks who do it in odd-numbered years like Crestview and Fort Walton Beach, they don't get a free pass every other election year. But Destin does. Part of the conversation that surrounded why we did this, especially as it relates to the folks in Destin, has to do with ballot position. So you're going to hear me talk a little bit later in my remarks about where city races end up on a general election ballot, and that answer is almost at the end of everything else. You're going to hear that they mentioned specifically in the Proclamation 91-11 that very little media attention gets paid to municipal candidates in a busy general election. If last year's general election in 2018 and the, I'm going to guess, big media attention that we're going to see in 2020, the question is what attention gets paid to local candidates and local issues when all of that maelstrom of stuff is swirling around at the federal level or state level for a governor's or a presidential race. Candidates, if this election day gets moved, will qualify in June. Right now, you make the decision whether you do or don't want to sit in one of those chairs approximately 2 months before the election, maybe 3. That's how far out you have to file. Because of the way the election cycle works, move the election cycle, and that qualifying becomes the qualifying in June before the primary, which your offices aren't going to be on the ballot in, but having to hold off until November. No need for me to tell anyone up there who is a candidate who has dealt with the fun and frivolity of filing campaign finance reports that that gives you a whole bunch more campaign finance reports to file during that period. Lastly, when Resolution 91-11 was adopted, it was adopted by a 6-to-1 vote, much like it sounds like your recent adoption in the last meeting on this issue was adopted in a 6-to-1 vote. So let me talk about turnout versus inflated turnout. Oh, and by the way, Parker, the lone dissenting vote was your dad, and I think you were 6 at the time, or 7 maybe. So let me talk about turnout versus inflated turnout and why this becomes important. So will moving your election onto a November ballot provide better turnout? Absolutely. Why? Because more people will be presented with the opportunity to vote in that race. That's how we calculate turnout. How many people saw the race, not how many people actually voted in the race. So when your race goes on a November ballot, it is going to go behind the federal races, behind the state races, behind the state legislative races, behind the county races, behind the constitutional officers and the Board of County Commissioners. It's going to go behind all of those judicial merit retention questions. It's going to go behind the judicial races. It's going to go behind the school board races. Then we're going to get to the municipal races on the ballot. And what are the voters doing by that third column on the ballot? Most of them have given up and moved on, is what happens. We call it ballot drop-off, and it's a very real thing. So your turnout most assuredly will be higher. I can't guarantee that what you're going to see is actually more votes necessarily. So what about those 5,000 people? I saw the analysis I think that you all were presented with where there was some talk about the difference between the number of people who turn out in a general election in the city of Destin versus the number who turn out in the municipal elections, and that number is about 5,000. So are we talking about keeping the elections in March or disenfranchising those 5,000 people? Absolutely not. Were any of those 5,000 people turned away from the polls in March when your elections were held? No. Were each of those 5,000 people at their household mailed a sample ballot as the law requires to let them know there was an election and to give them the opportunities that they had to vote and make all of that information available to them? Absolutely. Why didn't those 5,000 people come? That's the $64,000 question. I would love to see higher turnout everywhere. I always would, but the reality is what drives turnout is candidates and issues, and when the voters are not enthused, and I'm from the city of Crestview. We have the record-breaking low turnout of municipal elections 2 elections ago. I think it was less than 4%. Not a great day for Crestview. But I can tell you that the next election, we were back up in the 10% because everybody didn't like what happened in the previous election with the low turnout. So just to bear that in mind. But that drop-off that I mentioned again is a very real issue. People give up after they voted for president or governor, senator, the other stuff that they came to vote for. Maybe they get to that last column, maybe they don't. Yes, we have a bunch of conscientious voters that will, but again, your turnout is going to be calculated based on how many people were presented the opportunity to vote in that race, not how many people actually vote in that race. Third, and most importantly, I want to talk about the fact that it is the law. Now, I took an oath when I came into office to uphold the laws of the state of Florida. I believe each one of you did as well. And despite the analysis that you received calling our special act of little consequence, and I quote from the document, Chapter 92-270 is a law. It was passed by the Florida legislature, which means it can be undone only by the Florida legislature, in my opinion and my lawyer's opinion, not by a municipal ordinance. There's been a Florida Supreme Court decision. Well, let me ask first, have any of you seen the document from my lawyer? Is it part of your packet of stuff this evening? It is not? Then I will provide you copies of that if I could. I think there's 10 copies there, so that should be enough for everybody, including the record.
Mr. Lux, who's your attorney?
My attorney is Mike Chesser. Okay. He has been an election law attorney in our county probably since the mid-90s. He was my predecessor's attorney. I have certainly maintained and kept him on as my attorney because nobody knows election law between me and Pat Holleran and Mike Chesser. That's probably the top 3. So one of the things that he's going to mention in that letter is a Florida Supreme Court decision, Roe versus the Pinellas Sports Authority, that says when a special act and a general law conflict, the special act will prevail. To me, that says the general law that you are being cited as your authority to move your election date is superseded by the special act that says this is when Destin's election is. So remember that Chapter 92-270 is a law. And my attorney's considered opinion is that that law trumps the law that you have been quoted as your authority to move your election date. And I just wanted to point that out. Lastly, let me talk about what the future of Destin elections could conceivably look like. And I don't say this by means of being contrary or difficult. I just want to point out some of the realities. So first and foremost, I want you to understand that the city of Destin has absolutely no authority to compel me or my office to conduct your elections. We do it as a courtesy. Right now we do it because it's the law that we agreed to. But outside of that law, if you guys go onto your own there is no requirement for me to conduct your elections. So what does that mean? That means that your city clerk becomes your filing officer and your election administrator. Poor Ray. So that means all the campaign finance laws, all the candidate filings for campaign finance now drop into his lap. Polling places, training poll workers, the responsibility for everything in this elections book, save the information on voter registration, that becomes your headache. Public ads, canvassing boards, etc., mailing out vote-by-mail ballots, returning and canvassing vote-by-mail ballots, all of that stuff comes back to you and drops in your lap. If you want to know how it works, cross the bridge into the city of Niceville and talk to them and see how their elections are conducted when they do everything by themselves. What is my responsibility to a municipality whose election I am not conducting? Statute 101.002 sub 2 simply says that I am required by law to deliver the records that are required to the municipality, which equates to your list of registered voters and your polling book that they sign in on. And that is the only thing I'm required to provide you if you do your own elections. As a courtesy, we always do petition signatures because part of your qualifying involves people signing petitions. Also vote-by-mail signatures on the vote-by-mail ballots you receive back so that they can be properly canvassed. We provide signature matching for those items as well, simply as a courtesy, because we possess the records and it's easier than transferring those files back and forth. And with that, that's all I have for you. I mean, we've been doing this since 1992 when this went into effect. Again, as I said earlier, I certainly agree we would all like more turnout. I am not sure, other than the inflated number that you will get, just because more people will be presented with the opportunity to vote, that this is necessarily a good thing for the city of Destin going forward. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Yes, Paul, stay right there. First up, Rodney Braden.
Thank you. Do you know what the cost is that the city pays your office to handle our election?
So for elections in which, that are held in conjunction with another countywide election like the PPP coming up next March, the city's cost in that case is legal advertising only, which is about anywhere from $800 to $1,200 probably for the election. In a year when I do everything in the years that we don't have the PPP, what is it, Ray, about 10 grand?
9,500.
9,500?
Okay. Let me tell you my experience with the elections, as you well know. The first one, when I ran, it was on presidential election, because I think we had to fill 2 seats or 2 seats at that time. But anyway, I wound up losing out by 300 votes out of, I want to say it was somewhere around 1,500 votes or something that I received. And then the next election, it was not. It was about 7 or 8 candidates was on the ballot, about the same as on the previous one. That one, it took, I think 577 votes is what it took for that one, and it tied on that one. So it was twice the people voted in the presidential election for the city for city council in that election, and I got the rare opportunity in the second election to come to your office and witness the recount, where I wound up winning by drawing the Queen of Hearts.
Still on my Facebook page.
Yeah, so anyway, watching that as they was putting those ballots back through the counters, it was amazing to me to see the people that voted on the ballots that just voted just for the tax that the fire department had on that ballot. It was voting for Destin City Council, and the fire department had a tax on that same ballot. Some people voted, just marked yes or no on that, and didn't even vote for a city council person. A lot of the ones I watched go through, they voted for the first 3 city council people, and they didn't even vote for a fire department tax. So I got to witness both portions of it, and it did when when I was running for city council and it was on a presidential election a year, there were all those other, 3 pages we had to vote for, and there were over twice as many people voted for Destin City Council in that election than did when it was just for Destin City Council. And the only reason there was that many people come out the second round when it was only Destin City Council was because the fire department had their tax on there, or it wouldn't have been that much turnout. So I'm a firm believer that it makes a huge difference, because I've seen it firsthand, to get a better turnout on the election for city council when it's in November. That's the reason, I would support it, just because I've actually seen it. And I'm here to do what's best, in the best interest of the citizens of Destin, not just, I'm not worried about giving Ray a little bit more work or, costing somebody a couple more dollars. We're already spending $9,500 on the election. I couldn't imagine, couldn't cost much more than that to hire it out to, private individual to do it for us. That's just my
I'd
thoughts.
be interested to see the quotes on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure we can get it from Niceville. I don't know
I mean,
what they pay.
honestly, just to give you a perspective for that. So one of the things I don't charge any of the cities for when we are charging them for the election, and the law does say that you're required, if I do your election, to pay my actual cost of the election. So what I'm charging you is the cost of your poll workers, the cost of the ballots themselves. What I don't charge you for is the use of my equipment. I don't charge you for ballot layout and design. So when I hear you say that the $9,500 that Destin pays literally every other election cycle, so once every 4 years, as a prohibitive measure, I can tell you that my election company, if I ask them to code my elections, are going to charge me $750 just for the data entry of putting the candidates into a database to generate a ballot style. That's just that one piece of the puzzle. Now, of course, you could also, you're not required as a city to do optical scan ballots. You could do hand-counted paper ballots like, Niceville used to do. But, I mean, again, there's charges for that stuff. I would be really interested to see somebody come in under what we charge you for the elections.
I wouldn't say that they would come in under it, but if they come in more, whatever the cost is, we're still looking at what's beneficial for this city. If it's a few more $1,000s, then so be it.
Mr. Lutz, I got another.
I'm good, Mayor. Thank you.
I got another council member that'd like to address some
I've
concerns.
always been pretty shocked at the discrepancy between the presidential preference and the off-year elections we have. It's about double the votes it takes to win. So obviously there is a big turnout problem, especially in the off-year, but I think we had pretty good turnout for the 2016 presidential primary. But our attorneys can swap memos back and forth all they want, disagreeing with each other, and they've already done that, as we see here tonight with Chesser's letter. But I've spoken to our attorney, and they have opined a course of action for us if this council, in fact, wanted to pass this ordinance, would be to pass the first reading and then seek an opinion from the AG office of the state of Florida. And if the Attorney General came back and said that, yes, we are within our rights and the law of the state of Florida to change our elections, would that change your stance on whether or not to hold this election?
It wouldn't necessarily change my stance from the perspective of is it or isn't it the law. That would simply delete one of the bullets on the talking points that I've just spoken from. The rest of the information still applies, in my opinion.
Okay.
Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. So one of my questions is, I'm all about the statistics, and you were talking about voter turnout, and you really didn't think there'd be that much of a difference. And so I actually went back and I took a look at the different voter turnout percentages, and it's a striking difference. And so I think that's what we're trying to get at, is clearly more voters being able to come out and vote, and that's what draws them, is the November election. When I look at the election already we had this year in March, it was a 7.8% turnout. Last year, 29.6%. Then the year before, 10.9%. And then the highest one we've seen in ages for these March elections was in 16, and that was a 39% turnout. But then when I take a look at the general election and the elections held in November, now the only ones on your site are obviously the even numbers, which is what we are anyway, but in 18, 62.5% turnout, in 16, 75.7% turnout, and in 14, a 49.8% turnout. So that's a major difference, and to me, I see, yay, more people coming to the polls and voting.
So remember, that turnout, and again, this is why I talk about an inflated number. So that turnout is based upon the number of voters who were afforded the opportunity to vote, which does not translate to votes necessarily. And of course, a little bit harder to put statistics on a vote for multiples race because more people are voting, more than one time, conceivably in each race, because they're allowed to vote for 2 or 3 or 4 depending on the year, and how many people are on the ballot for how many seats. So that'll always change the number. But if you look at the times the race gets counted versus the number of votes that are cast in that race as a measuring stick, I would be interested to see the analysis from that 62% turnout, which by the way was calculated on the federal race that was first on those ballots, or the statewide race in the governor's years, versus how many people actually voted in those down ballot races, how many votes were truly cast down there, because that number is not going to be the same, I promise you.
I'd like to see that too. I think that'd be interesting. I think, one thing that stands out to me though is if there are more people heading to the polls to vote, even if it's for president or whatever else, that's more people headed to the votes. So even incidental votes or people that normally wouldn't go, that number is just automatically going to be slightly higher because there's more people heading, right?
And oddly enough, to that point, Rodney Braden already made that point, which is how many ballots did you see, Rodney, where they just filled in the first 3 ovals and moved along because maybe what they were really interested in was the fire district race on that ballot, not the city council race. That's great for people whose names begin with B and whose names begin with D, but that's probably not so great for people whose names begin with M or R.
It worked all right for me both times.
And maybe O.
All right, Paul, I got a couple more people lined up here to quiz you a little bit. Mr. Marler.
Well, actually, it's not a quiz, but some of the other statistics are controversial issues. When I first got elected to council in 2000, we had 2 controversial issues, beach renourishment and the Silver Shells condominium. So we had a very large voter turnout at that time. In 2016, we had, of course, the bar. I don't even say that word. But we had an issue with a topless bar that we wanted to put in, and there was a large voter turnout for that. And Mr. Braden is right in some respects. In the 2012 election, I won by 32 or 33 votes, I believe, and then the 2016 election, I just barely squeaked by Mr. Mitchell over here with 6 votes and won. So the vote does count, but also the controversial issues come up that I also think has a lot to do with voter turnout.
Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Paul, I think the world of you. You're a good supervisor of elections. I disagree with the contention that everybody, the idea being that we were going to go to a universal municipal election date and then everybody would know that, March is when we do municipal elections. I feel like that's a political science experiment that has had 30 years to test itself out, and the results are pretty poor. My feeling on it is, assuming, and I'll support what Mr. Morgan said about pursuing an AG's opinion, and if the AG's opinion came back that said that we had the authority to move the date, clearly there's going to be implications for the administration of your internal functioning of your office should you end up having to do this election. Furthermore, I think there'd probably be political implications that, let's say if Destin defected, that some of the other 6 municipalities may want to follow suit, which would have impacts for you as well. My suggestion to alleviate that to some degree is I don't really want to go outside of your office to have to administer elections, but clearly if we have a disproportionately new impact upon your office, I don't think $9,500 is anywhere near what it probably would cost you to have to shift and do the internal workings of administering our election in what is already a hyper busy and burdensome time for your office. So I would be entertaining, at least if we get to that point, to hearing what it would actually cost if we went for you guys to continue administering us, because clearly I think that if you gave us a number, I would seriously consider some big numbers, given the numbers potentially that we could achieve with voter turnout. And I know it's going to be a lot more than 9,500, I'd imagine. But I would prefer to see you continue in the relationship with the city administering the elections, because I know you do a good job. But I do know that this has meaningful impacts to your office. So I want to put that ahead before we go down this road and potentially, I don't want it to become any more acrimonious, is what I mean as well.
All right, thank you. That's all I had for comments from the peanut gallery. And for me, I'm just going to stand by and see. I think our attorneys have a viable plan for us to get an opinion from the Attorney General, and then we'll go from there. I appreciate all your concerns and your talking points, and I know you sit in elected office as well, and so hopefully we can work through all this, that it doesn't affect your office, your job, and the election process as a whole. I think this council is really serious about evaluating this, and I just thank you for all your talking points and your time.
Very good. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, council members. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you'd like, I'd make that motion.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds to me like that it's the will of this council to have the election in November. And I think there's only two sticking points. Number one, how much is it going to cost us to do it? And number two, is it legal for us to do it? And so if we do the Attorney General thing, that'll sort that out. So I'll move to direct the attorneys to prepare an ordinance aligning the city's municipal election day with the state general election day in November of even numbered years, and direct the city clerk to advertise the ordinance for first reading at the June 17th, 2019 council meeting.
Second.
All right, we got a motion, we have a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to allow public comment on this, if anybody wants to weigh in, and then we'll have discussion here and a vote. Does that sound good with the council? Our council recommended that we have public comment on this particular motion, just to allow somebody the opportunity, unless, I mean...
No, and actually, under Robert's rules, typically you do public comment after the motion is made anyway. But since the public comment period has not yet occurred on the agenda, the appropriate mechanism would be now allow public comment on this motion.
Yeah, and this was a presentation, so, correct, unlike a formal item on the thing. So if everyone's willing, let's go ahead. Is anyone in the audience like to weigh in on this discussion, on this particular motion to change our election date? Seeing none, I'll close this portion of it. Council members, does anyone have any further comments?
Are we going to send this to the AG as part of this after the ordinance is done?
If Mr. Overeyer's motion was to draft the ordinance, bring it back for first reading, hold it in abeyance before second reading, seek the AG opinion, wait on the AG opinion, depending on what the AG says, then hold second reading.
Ray?
I just have a question for the city attorney. Because he and I spoke about the advertising portion of this. It's not a land use ordinance, meaning it only requires one advertised public hearing. However, if we are to advertise for the 17th, there's not enough time. So if we can have the first reading without being advertised, that's good, and then we can advertise the public hearing on July 1st if they approve it on first reading, if that's okay.
Ray, my recommendation to council would be to go ahead and advertise this on first reading, even though I don't believe that is strictly legally necessary, just an abundance of caution. I would recommend that we hold off on having first reading and allow Ray enough time to get that in the newspaper for public.
Okay.
Any other further comment? Let's go ahead and take the motion with a second to a vote. The vote is 6-1, so moved. All right, up next is public comments on agenda items that are not public hearings and any other matter not on the agenda. In other words, you can talk about anything you want, other than what's on the public hearing side of things. So we'll open up the public comment period at this time, and I'll call my designated list of one up first. After that, I'll survey the audience and ask anyone if they'd like to step up. Mr. Buckingham, you have the floor.
Mayor, how are you, sir?
I'm breathing air, so it's all good.
Mayor, council, thank you. Mike Buckingham, 510 Calhoun. Some of you all are aware that I own the property at 111 Harbor Boulevard, and I had a few friends that asked if they could post a few signs on my property, and I said, most definitely, not a problem. Well, some of you might have seen today the damage that was done. I'm here to let you, Mayor, and the council know that we have some bad people in this community. They're not doing nice things. And he's involved. Trust me, he's involved. They've done a report, and they're going to be keeping an eye on it. And I do have, the good news is there is 4 property owners, business owners, restaurant owners on the Harbor District area that has seen this happen today and has offered to buy new signs for these individuals. So I'm just here to let you know, Mayor and Council, that we have some bad people in this community, and they should not be messing with personal property. And maybe y'all might want to keep your eyes out, if you could. And if you see anything, most of you have my number, please call me. Thank you.
What is this, like people destroyed signs,
Oh, yeah,
advertising
yeah,
signs?
They're just
or?
not being nice people. Yeah, they're just not being, yeah, exactly. Yeah, just not being nice people. But if y'all see anything, please let us know. Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know.
Thank you, Ms. Buckingham. Anyone else that would like to have their day in the sun? Come on up. You know the routine. Just press the red button, state your name and where you live, and glad you're here.
Hi, y'all. My name's Ron Sandstead, and I live at 337 Calhoun. And you know that, most of you know that I'm the one doing the banner art project on Main Street, and I want to thank the city for all the cooperation that we've had. Tim Piedenpaul and his crew has been great. Lisa Firth has contacted me, and she's taken my retired banners that I just retired off of Main Street and put them over at the community center. So there's 8 banners hanging over at the community center, and they look pretty awesome. And we have succeeded on Main Street. I think we're succeeding on Main Street. I haven't heard any negative comments, and I'd like to, at this point, try to expand our project with your permission. And I'd like to do one of 2 things. I'd either like another 4 banner poles on Main Street that we can use for artist banners, or I'd like also possibly using the light poles on Main Street. There are 38 light poles on Main Street. I'm looking at maybe using 10, 12 of them for taking our retired banners and hanging banners on the light poles. And I've talked with Mr. Destin about this in the past, and he thinks that there's a possibility, but anyway, I'd like for you guys to talk about it maybe and tell him that this is something that you all would support. We don't own the banner poles, we understand it, we don't own the light poles on Main Street, so we would have to get permission from Gulf Power. And I'd like to see that happen, hang a banner on each pole, and I think it would decorate a little more of our city. So if you guys got any questions, that's what I wanted to talk about. And thank you so much for the opportunity to do what we've been doing. Our artists absolutely love the attention that they've been getting.
Ron, I'm not going to speak for the whole council, but just for myself personally, it's one of life's simple little pleasures to see that artwork. And I was thinking about, it looked so good when you first put them up, that expansion all the way down Airport Road would really be cool, because it's really nice to see. And now I'm at the point where I want to see what's next. So you have my support. I don't get to vote, but I'm sure the council
Okay.
members will want to weigh in on this.
Well, it's good to have you come and talk to us tonight, especially after what we heard from Mr. Buckingham, telling us what bad people we have here in Destin, and I appreciate that there probably are bad people here, but it's also nice to know that we've got people like Ron Sandsted, people like Alan French that are trying to make this a better community for us. Ron, I was just asking, are you wanting us to ask Gulf Power for permission to use their poles, or are you going to do that, or?
Well, in the past, what happened, Mr. Miller, Jerry Miller, was in negotiation with Gulf Power. This is 3, 4, or 5 years ago. And supposedly it came back that Gulf Power had given us permission, but there was liability issues of what would happen if the light pole was to be damaged. Who would pay for that light pole? And I really don't know what happened with that negotiation. I would just like that issue revisited so that we can hang, there's 38 light poles. We wouldn't want to do every one of them. We'd do maybe 12 of them and just get more banners down Main Street on the sides.
I know last year when we were negotiating and speaking with Gulf Power, I sat in as the city representative at one of the meetings, and I actually posed that question and asked if it was something they were amenable to, and they said yes. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And if we couldn't get that type of agreement, what kind of cost are we talking about expanding it? 4 poles, or if we started doing 7 or 8, banner poles?
I believe all you would have for expense would be the banner arms, and you'd want the banner arms that would move in case of wind, so they would, it would be like a sailboat. You get knocked down, you release your sheet, and the sail releases the wind. So that's what the banner arms, these special banner arms, and they're $30 or $300 a pair, is what I understand. So 10, 12 of them times 300. So that kind of thing doesn't have to happen this year. It can happen, be put in the budget and be for next year if that's what we do.
Just don't let us forget about it. All right, Ron, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Next, Miss Bell, you look like you're the only person I see.
Marcy Bell, yes, I like being the last one. If somebody says something I was going to say, then I can just take it off my list. 3 Gulf Breeze Court, Holiday Isle. So the first thing I wanted to bring to your attention was that Councilmember Minchell and I attended the Tropical Town Hall up in Niceville last Thursday evening for 2 hours. And I would like to ask the City Council to maybe bring the gentleman who made that particular presentation here. It was very informative. I think it might be the same program that you guys did down south, probably on a smaller scale, but it had a lot of interesting information. I never considered myself an expert on hurricanes, but there was a lot more to learn that I never knew. So hopefully you guys will make that effort to have him come here sooner than later. He said he likes to always come and meet groups. The second thing I wanted to say was that I commend the council from your position on, with the exception of one person, for the movement of the election from March to November. And I think that's a really great thing that you guys are moving to do. I'd like to see more voters out there for you guys to see how the public supports you and the citizens. And the last thing I wanted to say was I was concerned about Saturday morning's newspaper and the short-term rental task force that's being advertised. I didn't understand that that's how that was working. I thought it was just going to be a reconvening of the current short-term rental task force, and I was just a little confused about that, so maybe somebody could clarify that for me. Thank you.
Anyone want to jump on the STR? We just talked about it last. Who made that motion?
It might have been me.
Yeah, and it was the
Does the advertisement appear to elicit applications?
It does, and that the committee was disbanded by time limit, so we do have to reappoint. We can reappoint the same people, but yeah.
I understand.
All right. Any other one? Any other people would like to come up? Seeing no further comments, I'm going to go ahead and close this portion of the meeting, and we will move into item 4, which is City Manager Report. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First up, we've got an update on the Triumph pre-application and the Haas Center study for a public beach initiative. We have Mr. Warren here to give us that update.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As provided in the packet, and as we discussed at last meeting, we would bring back an update for this meeting on that. And as you can read in your packet, we have submitted a pre-application, which is required by the Triumph Committee, and they did announce last week that they will be discussing this item at the June 20th meeting. And as promised, we also were going to bring back a study that we were engaging the Haas Center on to get a proposal on to help us get the economic data associated with this project. But given the fact that Triumph is going to give us some feedback on our pre-application and that current status, I think it would be best at this time to defer until we get their feedback so we know if this is the right direction or not as we continue to pursue additional funding.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Warren? Seeing none, you want to go into second round?
Very good. And just to piggyback that, there will be some costs involved with that, but the data will be well worth it. The Triumph Committee has made it clear that they're data-driven on their decisions, so this would help our effort if we make it to the next step.
Yeah, and Webb and I have attended a couple of these already, and one of the key things that is brought up time and again on all of these different projects is ROI. They want to see, because the money, this particular pot of money is for economic development. So we have to show an economic benefit outside of the fact that we need more public beach. And that's why we're going to have to go down the road of trying to get some of those data points so we can make that economic argument, along with the fact that, Triumph money was created by a ecological disaster that affected our community, and actually doing something that has something to do with the beach is kind of near and dear to my heart versus some of the projects that they're earmarking some of this Triumph funding. So that's one of the key things is showing an economic argument outside of the easy to understand that we need more public beach park access.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The other thing we have before you, Mr. Forgione compiled some stats regarding Memorial Weekend, and he is available if you'd like to ask him any questions. I'd like to commend the staff on their first full holiday weekend of having people down on the harbor and on the beach, and by the stats you can tell they were busy.
Does any of the council members have anything they'd like to ask Joey about this?
Joey, the beach vendors look like they've been a lot of fun to deal with. So, good job. This list is
Can I build on what actually Chatham just said? That is a huge concern to me, and I've talked to Joey about the way mostly the vendors are treating our code enforcement officials. And I know he's trying to sort of come up with some ways to tackle that, but it's atrocious. I mean, a lot of folks out there have such a sense of entitlement, and they're verbally abusing our code enforcement officials, and it really, really bothers me, especially since I know several of our code enforcement officers are retired military and have fought for this country, and they've got 17-year-old kids screaming curse words at them on the beach, and there's no repercussions. So I don't know what we can do. You can't teach respect, right? But it's troublesome that people feel that they're able to treat people doing their job and the right thing in such a manner. So let us know how we might be able to help you if you come up with any good ideas.
Yes, ma'am, we will.
One of the things that I attended Okaloosa County's beach vendor meeting, they had a they brought everybody in there, and they do talk about protocols and being nice to each other, and who's going to be, looking out after them. And I think we're the ones that are issuing the BTRs for these people to run their business. So I think that we should have the capability and the right to weigh in on that discussion on how they
That's a
operate.
great point.
So maybe Kyle or Kim or Webb and Lance can, as a staff, put together some ideas to bounce off of the council and come up with a list of protocols that we would like to see implemented without passing an ordinance or resolution, but something where we can have that discussion with the beach vendors, and it's maybe a checklist. If you want to maintain your BTR, this is how you're going. You need to act. So. Maybe we can't dictate to them how they need to act, but we can dang sure dictate them how they interact with our city employees.
Yeah, like maybe issuing warnings or something when they do that, and if they get more than a certain number of warnings, then maybe they don't get their permit. I mean, I don't know, that's a little extreme, but maybe it's not.
No, but
don't know.
I mean, that's a dialogue I think we need to
Yeah,
have.
good idea.
Unfortunately for Joey, he's got 90 more days of total chaos until he gets a handle on it.
Yeah.
Anything else, Lance?
Mayor, I've got one more thing for Joey about this. Are these incidents of the vehicles on the beach overnight? We just passed an ordinance. It's on this list. I mean,
Yeah.
4 incidents of parking vehicles in storage overnight on the beach.
Yeah,
6
there's-
occurrence of use of vehicles between hours 8 and 5. I mean, we spent a lot of time creating this ordinance.
I'm waiting on the stickers to come in. They do know that the ordinance is in place. We're showing them, and they pretty much got.
But I mean,
he pretty much got told off.
Yeah, but you have teeth in your ordinance to enforce
Yes,
this, right? And send them to the magistrate?
Yeah.
Because I would
we got-
expect, if we, and I know y'all are doing a fine job and you have your work cut out for you, but if we pass these ordinances to address real problems in this community, and especially on our beaches, which we all know are plagued with problems, and a lot of them stem from beach vendors, I hope these ordinances we pass are going to be enforceable by you and enough of a penalty to deter this kind of activity.
I'm just waiting on like the citations to come in. I just got the authorization
Yeah.
from the clerk of courts. They approved them. So
Sure.
I'm just waiting on them to be printed.
Yeah, and if there's any way, and I know we had the business tax receipt equity commission, if there's, and so now that we have cleared that hurdle, we're able to change our ability to kind of parlay our enforcement capabilities with business tax receipt. I don't know if it's increasing the fines or.
On some,
That'll be them.
yeah,
Because if we can use the business tax receipts as leverage to get these people to, follow our ordinances, which they need to because it is a circus. And
Mr. Morgan, I wonder how much of, and maybe Joey, you can answer it, how much of the initial problem is just lack of knowledge as far as where we've gone. Do we need to do a better job of reaching out to each one of the BTR holders with the new rules and regulations so they can't shrug their shoulders when one of his officers come out and say, hey, I didn't know? What do you think about that, Joey?
I think what has happened is for the past year or two, it's been lack of enforcement or knowledge. And now that we've hit back out there, they're like up in arms. And so now this weekend, it's actually been a little easier for him. And he's starting to gain compliance and they're starting to self-regulate. I've had a couple talks with them about certain ones about how they're treating officers. And we're going to contact the sheriff's office and they'll back us on this. So,
Mr. Destin.
Yeah, to piggyback off of the mayor's point and Mr. Morgan's point, I do remember us putting together the BTR commission and appointing members to it because I thought that the process was statutorily, if we were going to convert the BTRs into more of a conditionally offered BTR receipt rather than just simply a by right, you pay, you get it, to link the BTRs and whether or not you are going to receive one to whether or not you have on-site violations. So my question gets to where are we in that process, if you know, and how do we get on track to making sure that we can have this tool in the toolbox for staff?
Currently, there's some portions of the code that allow revocation of a BTR if you violate it, and other portions of the code where you can't. So basically, if we want to put that everywhere, we just need to put in language saying that.
Mr. Marler?
Joey, do you have, you had the 114 verbal warnings issued for the violation of no wake. Do you have a breakdown of what type of vessels they were?
From my understanding, probably about 80% was your jet skis and your pontoon boats, from what I was told by your harbor unit.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Mr. Braden?
Yeah, I'm afraid we're going to have to do the beach vendors kind of like we did Crab Island. We warned them, and then we had to step in and take action. So I would like for the staff, for the attorneys to look into it a little bit of what, to get ready if we do have to take action, what we can and can't do. And it'd probably be something, I'm sure, for next year to reel them in on it, or something that we can, because we've asked for years now, and it's been a problem every year. So I guess we're going to have to step in and do something about it ourselves.
Does the council feel like we need to make a motion to?
Why don't we give you just a
Correct
consensus
that?
to look into it and then bring it back to us with a proposal? Because I know that there's probably some legal stuff you guys got to analyze.
Yeah, I was gonna recommend that y'all just provide us a consensus. I think that there are some things we're gonna have to look at and bring back some recommendations before we can proceed any further. But if that's a priority of the council, we'll make it a priority.
Just by looking around, I think we do have a consensus to go down that avenue to take a look at it. So just consider the direction from the council is to begin that process.
And we'll try and come back with some recommendations as soon as we can.
All right, seeing no further comment on that, go ahead, Lance.
This is one last item. As you know, for the last couple of meetings, we've been trying to get an FDOT representative here to update us on the RRR project, and to no avail so far, as you can tell. I was informed today that if a request came directly from the mayor or myself, we could probably make that happen. So I just want council's permission to move forward with that.
Yeah, I talked to Lance earlier today, and I feel like if we make a formal request, I mean, he's the regional director for Northwest Florida as a whole, that may have a little more weight. And I've talked with a couple I've talked with Mel Ponder, and I think we can get a couple other letters from the business community and hopefully Senator Gaynor and Representative Ponder that would to add to that.
Mr. Mayor, on that topic, I sent the city manager an email on that, but rather than do a presentation here, it's going to be critical for us to have an FDOT representative at our workshop. If we don't have a representative there that can actually answer our questions, not some worker bee, somebody with authority, and I was going to discuss that during my portion, but I would submit if we can't get them twice, I would submit it's more important to have them at our workshop, because we need that feedback from them.
So noted. We can ask them to come back twice, or at least once, with the workshop being the priority of the two.
Very good. We'll ask him to come to the meeting and the workshop, and if he can only attend one, to attend the workshop if possible.
Everybody okay with that?
All I can say is good luck, because I can't even get him to return my phone call.
I'd rather be lucky than good. Is that it? End of this manager report. All right, Mr. Bowman, take it away.
Yes, we only have one ordinance tonight. It is on first reading, and it is ordinance number 19-09-LC. An ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the official zoning map as referenced in the Land Development Code, Section 7.12.01A2. Zoning maps to include a change in the zoning designations of 468 parcels, generally depicted in the location map attached, Destin, Florida, to match the assigned land use designation of the future land use map of the comprehensive plan, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for zoning map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. We're going to conduct this as a quasi-judicial hearing. If I could get the members of staff who are going to testify on the matter to stand and raise their right hand. Mr. Zanguzzi, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is the truth?
I do.
Okay. And if there's any members of the audience who wish to testify on this matter, if you could please stand so I could swear you in as well. Seeing no one, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
All right, well, we'll, and that pretty much, seeing how nobody stood up, that means we don't have anybody going to speak in the public hearing as well, correct? All right. I will open up the public hearing portion of this meeting as part of the public record. Seeing no one, I'm going to go ahead and close this portion of the public hearing session and take it away, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I thought by way of putting a context and some background, it would be helpful if I just kind of went back to talking about how we got here. If you recall, back in February, we came down after your direction to look at aligning our future land use map and our zoning map. And at that meeting, we identified 16 areas where there were conflicts. And after that, on March 4th, you directed us to take a number of actions, namely to create the Calhoun Village zoning category, which we have done. You also asked us to look at the town center mixed use, which we have done. You also asked us to, as part of the alignment of the comprehensive plan policies, we created the overlay district for the harbor area. And we also are at this point today to complete a portion of that action and asking you to look at rezoning a total number of 468 parcels that are part of those 16 areas that we shared with you back in February. Now, if you recall back then, you asked us to hold back areas 7 and 15, which we have. And so what we're bringing you is everything else but areas 7 and 15. And I'm so pleased to let you know that out of that entire effort, my staff have been extremely diligent in working through these categories. We managed to only create 3 non-conforming uses out of a total of 468 parcels. That's incredible. And if you go back to that slide, please. Out of those non-conforming uses, when we do address the land development code, we will take off that non-conforming by assigning a conditional use aspect for the district they're located in. And so we will eventually eliminate that non-conformity for those parcels. So what we're asking you tonight is to address those 468 parcels so that we can move to the next steps, which I can address if you so wish at this point. 7 and 15 are the areas that we need to address also in the future to determine designations for 4 and 5. You could go to 4 and 5, please. Okay. This area here is zoned, will be zoned ROI. In the future land use map, that's what the classification is. But as far as our zoning code is concerned, we have up to 4 different types of ROI. And we have to make a decision as to which one of those will be more appropriate for those areas. If you go back to, okay. The other things that we're going to have to do is amend the comprehensive plan in terms of policies for the TCMU with respect to height and density, which you've asked for. Also, we have our city
properties, as far as our parking lots that are not in sync with respect to the zoning and the comp plan. We need to do that as well. And then we need to update our comprehensive plan with respect to policies regarding coastal areas as per the state regulations. And then the last two efforts that we have to mount are actually rewriting our code so that it completely lines up with our comprehensive plan. And then something that is very dear to me and Lance, we have to update our impact fees. So those are the steps that are left for us to undertake if you do what's being asked of you this evening.
Do we still have the two properties? I can't remember out of all the properties lined up, the one out on the east end of town and the other piece of property in the Calhoun mixed-use area. Do we ever deal with that?
I'm not so sure which properties you're talking about. Are they the ones that were covered by the Calhoun Village zoning district that we recently created?
I think one was the Guidry property out there on the east property line.
Yeah.
Number
10
15.
acres.
Oh, no, 15 is up for you to,
Right, that's what I was
decide.
asking about.
Yeah, but that's-
What's next for us to deal with those two properties? 15 and 5, was it, or 15 and 7?
It's 7 and 15. We need to decide which classification. Do you want to stay with what the comp plan says, or do you want to go different?
When do we do that?
After this effort here, we just have to set up a workshop and deal with all the other issues that we need to deal with, and then you decide, yeah.
Okay. No set timeline, it'll just be the natural progression.
Yeah, I would like to do that as soon as possible.
Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a few concerns and a few questions. So I will start with my questions. The first question I have is I noticed the rezoning of Destin water users and how before it was considered institutional and now we're switching it to something else. And I'm just curious if the goal of this is to reduce inconsistencies or even remove them. Why would we want to make an entity that's an institution essentially not an institution? What's the thought behind that?
We feel that use, if it's zoned by itself, will be essentially spot zoning. So I think it will be adequately accommodated as a conditional use in the district that it is in.
Okay. But I mean, like if you have a school or a church, it might look like spot zoning, but hey, it's a church or a school, so it's supposed to be institutional, right?
Yeah, but there'll be permitted uses, just looked at differently from a review standpoint.
Okay.
Right.
Several of these, and I'm going to sort of share my line of thought as I went through all of this information so that y'all kind of go along with me and see why I'm leading to what I am. I went through and several of these, and if you could, Webb, I sent you some images. Would you put up the one that's the actual zoning thing that Lewis put together that we actually have in our packets? So when you look at this, there's clearly some sections of town that we have to address tonight. There's one right over there off Calhoun-Seibert area. Then you've got another one right there at Mountain and Benning. And then there's one right where 98 kind of intersects and goes into Airport. And then a couple other random parcels. So I was looking at that, and then suddenly I realized, because we've been talking about the connector, and I had some documents related to the connector and potential pathways. Webb, would you put the second image up, please? Now, it's kind of hard to tell because that's further back, but there's an overlap there between the two giant sections that we have zoning changes for that were done and then not done with our, I would say, express knowledge. I was on the council when one of these was passed in a flume map that we knew nothing about, actually all of these. So it was very concerning to me to take a look and see, number one over there where you see on that west side, that's where Azalea was going to punch through or potentially punch through Stallman over to Seibert and Calhoun. The other section with the big yellow is where the connector empties out down over there. And we've got a whole section of stuff. Go back to the zoning map, if you wouldn't mind. I'm sorry, Webb. So the other section is right there where Azalea and Benning and Mountain and all of those come together, where we're going to have a heavier flow of traffic. And as we all know, 98 and Airport is where all the construction changes, and we're going from 2 to 3 lanes. So we're going to have some bottlenecks right in that area potentially as well. Hopefully we'll find a way to address that. But to me, it's very, very concerning to see these hubs of activity where the zoning has changed. And of all of these, I thought, well, maybe I'm just trying to see too much into this or something. So I actually took a look at the zoning and compared what it was to what we're trying to now make consistent that was changed unknowingly. And in every case, it's greater density. This commercial general to the TCMU goes from, let me see the difference here. It increases to 40 for short-term rental density, which is way above what it currently was. And if that's not making sense, this whole thing is confusing because we have the flume that was passed with the comp plan and then the zoning map, which is the separate map. So the other incident here is ROIGD, also looking to be changed to TCMU. And in that instance, it's a 12 density, increasing to a 19.9 and even up to a 40 density. And then CBN and CBR, actually, which is the little one down there, which I didn't bring up, but that one's an increase in 6 to 12. So I'm very concerned at what appears to be, well, it's not, I guess, spot zoning, I don't know, but it's just very troublesome to me, especially on top of all the questions and concerns people have been bringing up. And I just go back to the other map. Is there any way to enlarge that a little bit? It's also interesting to see, thank you, yeah, right there where that other dotted line diagonally is, that's Mountain to 98. So that's would cut through Sexton's or Marine over there on that side. It's just, and again, this is just one plan that was put out there, but it certainly fits in line with what we're currently seeing and what we're currently hearing in terms of long-term plans to the connector that I, for one, sitting up here, had no knowledge about whatsoever.
Where did this come from, this plan?
This is actually, I've seen it in a couple different places, but the most recent location was actually in a packet prepared, and Ray actually brought me a copy of this tonight. This was actually not passed, but it still fits in with what we're seeing in plans for the connector. This comes from the Destin Harbor Area Master Plan that was pulled together around 2000. And it was part of the Sasaki plan that was worked on jointly with the city, and then the Chamber of Commerce came in and worked on it together, which explains why maybe there's a lot of lingering thoughts about this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, and it keeps getting brought up this way because this is what the original intention was. But you can see clearly where, and I've seen recently a former councilman talked about punching through Azalea over past Stallman, and you can clearly see that's right in line with what's right there and where all that traffic would flow into Seibert and down towards the Calhoun area where all that zoning was mysteriously changed. So I would really like, Mr. Zunguze, what are your thoughts? Do you think this warrants further discussion, or I'm concerned by it, and I know as a planner and community development director that you see things sometimes that we don't see. Is this compelling enough that you think we maybe need to pull it and talk about it and look at it a little more, or what are your thoughts?
A couple of thoughts. The first one is either we have full faith in our comprehensive plan or we don't. What we currently have right now, what we have given you is what we thought in the department is what is the direction from the future as far as land use is concerned. Now, can we always debate some of these classifications? Certainly. Now, with respect to your specific question about those areas, the question that I would ask the council is there clarity as far as that corridor is concerned? If it is a go, then suddenly the classification that you see in your comprehensive plan kind of reflect that land use around that area is likely going to change. Because you can't put a serious facility like that with the densities that don't match. And so the upsizing of the density clearly reflect that there's a facility from a transportation standpoint that's being thought of. And so I see a correlation as far as that is concerned. The question is that facility something the council wants to see or not? If it's not, then we have to revisit all those classifications around that area.
Yeah, and I know our goal is to address inconsistencies, but in this case, the inconsistency we're addressing is the fact that these were all changed. Most of them, I don't know if any of them were. I know the one that Mr. Gidriam, parcel, I think 15, for example, that neighborhood that was impacted, they never received any notification. So, and sitting up here, we didn't get any notification of these parcels and different things being changed on the flume map. Again, it was passed as part of the comp plan. So you talk about having faith in the comp plan, and I fully have faith in what you were doing and your current staff are doing, and I truly do. But my concern is things that we're now trying to make consistent based on things that were inconsistent prior for whatever reason, if that makes sense.
Sure, it does. Now, 15 is not part of the group of properties that are being...
Right.
And so is 7. So those two are not part of what's being discussed this evening. Now, if there are others that you are alluding to that you want us to take another look at, we certainly can.
Yeah, for me, the main concern is the section on the west. I'm sorry, Webb, if you could go back to the zoning again. That section on the west, which I believe is mostly CMU-V, I believe is what we were looking at. And then the one sort of in the middle, that giant piece right there where Mountain and Azalea come together. Not Mountain and Azalea, Benning. Yeah. That is a concern to me because of the increase in the density. That's clearly where we're going to have a big flow of traffic if we build the connector. I mean, I hate to say this, but it almost looks like insider trading. That's where it's going to go. I'm going to buy this. Let's get this. And again, I don't want to be like conspiracy theorists, but with all that we've seen and heard, and there's certainly enough, I think, here to be concerned about and talk about and determine if we really do want to increase like that in certain areas. So those are my concerns with that. And I guess I'll leave it at that. I would like to see at least those two spots pulled for further discussion, but that's Preble's thoughts. I'd love to hear what others think and if they feel it warrants the same attention.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you. Yeah, it's even more troubling that, I continue to ask what the plan is down on that end of town, and nobody's ever said a word, and here's something that's been in the works since 2000. Nobody's got any idea, but here, we got ideas, they just don't want to tell us. Yeah, I wasn't sure or realized that by passing this tonight, it was going to increase, in some places double the density in these areas. I thought maybe from I guess when we passed the comp plan, I guess I realized the flume was passed at the same time. But anyway, with this come to light tonight, I would really like to take a second look at it and do some more research on it, because there's definitely something in the works, definitely something in the plans, and I'd like to know exactly what I'm voting on before we pass this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. Everybody knows I'm musically inclined, so I'm going to throw two songs out. Phil Collins' Land of Confusion and Randy Travis's Digging Up Bones. The reason I bring this up is the Sasaki plan, half the stuff that everybody keeps bringing up was put on a shelf, and that's where it stayed. We paid a lot of money for it, it got on a shelf. That's where a lot of the misinformation and the confusion is on a lot of different things. I was going to wait and bring this up during my time, but Mr. Braden is bringing up something. When at the last meeting where we talked about the crosstown connector, he alluded to some of this stuff here, and I'd like to have the staff, I talked to Ms. Kopp about this, of trying to find out exactly all this information piled together. I was elected to council when the Sasaki plan came before us, and we shelved it. One of the reasons we shelved it, and I let Ms. Ramswell know about this earlier, was that part of their plan was to make Highway 98 and Azalea and the Mountain Drive one way to go. 98 would stay the same, but then Azalea and Mountain would have a one-way east, one-way west, and that was some of the things that was stopped cold in its tracks. We've probably paid for at least half a dozen plans in the 16 years that I've been part of the council, and 99% of it have been shelved. And then somehow or another it gets dusted off and somebody brings it up that we did this in the past, or where this is still on the books, and it's not. So I have to agree that I think we need to look at this a little bit more clearly as far as before we do some rezoning. But we need to get a consistency of what is the actual plan that we are looking at today. None of the plans that seem to be going backwards here were ever approved by any of the councils, to my knowledge, in the 16 years that I've been on the council. And that's where the confusion is on the crosstown connector and everything. It's the same confusion that I think we've got a lot of misinformation out there, people bringing up past things that they thought was still on the books, including staff and conspiring against us, and now we're trying to do an open be transparent. And in that frame of mind, the stuff that Mr. Braden alluded to at the last meeting of things that he learned, I'd like to have Ms. Kopp and the Community Development Department try to get all that information together. I'd like, because when he brought it up a couple of weeks ago, there was no documentation. It was just what he said he found. I'd like to know what he found. I'd like to see it in writing. And then maybe we can get some of this confusion out of the way, because I think that's the major problem. We've got so many different plans out there, so many different things, and nobody knows what we're actually looking at, and that's probably why the crosstown connector didn't make it this past round. So I think that's what we need to do. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Marler. Mr. Mansell, you go first, and then I'll go last.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, in the last council meeting, I discussed the email that I had sent asking for all that information, and Mr. Bailey is still working very hard to compile the data that I asked for, which is basically the background on everything you all are talking about. When I went to his office last week, it's about this thick so far, okay, and he's still going. You talk about misinformation. I'll be the first to tell you that I have no idea what was discussed in 1987. It brings up a lot of questions, and from 87 forward. It brings up a lot of questions to me. How many people have rotated through these seats since 1987, and why are we still talking about it? Okay, that's the number one question. Why didn't other people vote on this? Why are we at a stalemate? But I'll tell you some analysis I have, and every time I turn around, I keep finding more new information that brings up questions. If you all if you all read the email that I asked the city manager or Rita to send you, it was from the Emerald Coast Regional Council. And it was talking about the 98 Stallman intersection and information pertaining to that. And this is brand new to me. Did anybody ever hear about a bus shuttle on the Crosstown Connector? Has anybody ever heard of that before?
A bus shuttle?
A bus shuttle. Okay, well, that's still in the works according to DC. Again, I don't know those things. And again, that's some other information about the Crosstown Connector that's news to me. And it clearly says, so this isn't hearsay information, it clearly shows potential. Okay, exactly. I'm just saying, these are things that every time we turn around about the Crosstown Connector, I keep getting more pieces and parts that are things that I haven't seen. We've had a lot of people up here ask for it, and I don't guess it exists. There's got to be some sort of master plan, the plan that somebody did. It's just crazy. You don't build a house without a blueprint. You know, I just can't see how we did those things, and Karen talks about all these plans we had. I understand that, I appreciate that. I'm just saying, every time we turn around, I'm personally, through information that I'm getting and looking at, Dr. Ramswell talked about it, a former council member talked about punching out to Calhoun Street. Okay, it's the first we heard of that. So there's all of these questions that keep coming up about the Crosstown Connector and associated pieces and parts. So again, I think too, with this new information, we need to take a look at it and evaluate it. I think we have too much going on and too many questions to make an informed decision, because quite honestly, I don't think we have all the information.
Mayor, I have one thing before you go. For the staff, for whatever Kyron wants, everything that I spoke of at the last meeting about the Crosstown Connector, I can provide to you in writing or a witness to who said what, for everything that I mentioned in my comments at that last meeting. So if you just get with me, I got it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. I got a couple things that I want to just mention. You asked a key question, Lewis. Do we believe in our comp plan or not? And that's something that we all need to ask ourselves. I got elected right as the comp plan was actually being voted on. I wasn't here for all the workshops and the multiple meetings, public hearings and meetings over that comp plan. That was approved by everyone here, but I guess Skip and Mr. Mitchell. So with some of the things that Lewis has brought to us, there's another question is, do we need to amend our comp plan? Which that is one avenue we can take, correct? So do we believe in the comp plan or not? It's the one that you all passed. And if there's new issues, you brought up a couple, Preble, that are concerning to you, then is that the next course of action that we take, is to amend the comp plan? Because even though we passed it less than a year ago, it wasn't everything we thought it was. So that's one thing I'd like for the council to consider.
Well, just for clarification, it wasn't, because the future land use map was not amended in this past round of comp plan amendments, so this was done by prior council.
The future land use.
Correct, which
Right.
is what's at issue here, because what we're talking about here is a future land use map that we're trying to become consistent with.
Right.
So that map was not reviewed during this last round of comp plan amendments.
But the whole goal is getting this flume in line with the comp plan, not vice versa.
No, the flume is,
Future land use.
the future land use map is a part of the comp plan.
Sure.
That was not reviewed as part of this last round of comp plan amendments. Our goal now is getting the LDC zoning map in compliance with that future land use map, but the areas that Councilmember Ramswell pointed out are areas 2, 4, and 5. So the decision for council tonight would be, if there is a concern about those specific areas, we could add them to areas 7 and 15, and you could still pass the ordinance and bring the rest of the zoning into compliance with the comp plan, or you could, of course, approve the entire ordinance or deny the entire ordinance on.
But it's going to be this council that's going to make those decisions and have the authority to legislate that, right? No other council, mayors, no other plans that were done 18 years ago is going to affect what this council decides to do with what we're trying to do here today. We have the authority to legislate this, correct?
If you vote on it tonight, sure.
There you go. And the reason I'm pointing that out is the history is important, but it's not today. This body has the authority to make the decisions for today and what's going to affect the future. If things were done in the past that is confusing or you don't like, we have the authority to change that. We don't have to look behind us to look at today and besides into the future. And I keep hearing about they. Who in the hell's they? Because we are the legislative body here. We are the ones that are going to make all the rules. We have an entire new staff. We have new city managers. This council hired all these people. We've put some trust in them. The council still has the final decision-making process to either take their recommendations or don't take their recommendations. But there's no conspiracy theory that happened 16 years ago that's going to get by this council who's going to decide today or in the near future what takes place in this city. Mr. Morgan said it so eloquently at our last meeting where he said, it's our comp plan, it's our LDC, and it's our responsibility to make the decisions. So I'm weary of these conspiracies when it's up to us today to make this happen. And
That's why I made the suggestion.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm saying, is that as we go through this process, we may find out that the things that disturb you the most about the flume and today's the time to fix it. Not look behind us, is all I want to say. I just want to recommend and encourage this council, let's stay focused on today and what we're going to do in the future. And I think we'll be much more effective in our legislative process. That's all I have to say. So, Louis, any comments? Would you like some direction or a motion out of this council to?
In talking to Louis also, he is recommending that council pull the portions dealing with ROI because it's not been determined which ROI district they need to be rezoned to.
Lance, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just real quick. I just wanted to chime in and say that this has been, you guys gave me this as my top priority as interim. And then when you put me in the chair finally and completely, you said that's still the top priority. So I'm just asking that let's not kibosh the whole thing. If there are areas that you want held back, let's hold them back, but let the team move forward so that we can continue to make it easier for staff to deal with those particular locations in the future.
I agree completely, and I so appreciate all the work and the time and the focus that y'all put on this. It's exactly what we asked for. It was a mere fluke that I happened to have the connector thing right there and then pull up the zoning thing and go, wait a minute, there's an overlap here. So I guess I'm glad I saw it before we passed it, so at least we have a chance to discuss it and make any changes if we see fit or not if we see not fit.
So and just to be clear, the areas that you're talking about are 2, 4, and 5. So if you wanted to pull them, you could refer to them that way, and then we could just simply remove those.
Can you show us 2, 4, and 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be 2, that Cahoon area.
Go back to the map. We need it a little bit bigger.
No, just
I would just like to chime in real quick. The number 2, we've discussed ad nauseum about Calhoun Mixed-Use Village. And we've had workshops on it in our comp plan. And that's the area between Calhoun Avenue and Seibert Avenue. And I know it aligns with the Sasaki plan, but, 3 years ago we pulled it when we were passing the new comp plan. And I believe we had a workshop completely dedicated to go and CMUV on it from ROI. But I've discussed number 2 enough. I don't need to discuss it anymore. So I won't support that, but I guess I'd support the others.
When we passed that comp plan, that Calhoun mixed-use CVU was the only area we did not discuss when we passed that comp plan.
We
left that
discussed
area
it enough to pull it, because I had the same concerns that this entire council did about the density there and
Yeah, and then we
the fact
added
they could build bars
conditions.
and restaurants and large condominiums, and we've since fixed Calhoun Mixed-Use Village.
Is
To an
that,
extent, yes.
is that documented? I mean, the conditional uses?
Yeah, passed that ordinance.
So I think this is probably the best course of action for the council at the moment. You know, without rehashing everything that we've already talked about the history of the city, how we ended up with the comp plan that we ended up having to amend. I mean, CMUV didn't become a thing until late 2015, right before I got elected. And the reason CMUV even became a thing was because, well, let's face it, there's tons of stuff that has happened over the last 20 years through, you know, gentlemen's agreements that everybody understands that, you know, everybody was going to get a little bit of what they wanted in certain areas, and you need to punch the traffic through to Calhoun and Seibert to justify, of course, the development that wants to occur in CMUV. And so that we're in the dog wagging the tail sort of situation here, but at the end of the day, we have done enough tweaks, I think, to CMUV to give the council enough oversight over that area currently to where if a person was to come and try to develop parcels within CMUV, just about everything of any onerous or noxious use has been set up as a conditional use within that district, meaning that this council, whoever's sitting here, would have to have a certain degree of comfort letting it in. It's not by right, it's not a permitted use, it's conditional. So that is a good oversight. That is a part of this that really we didn't have until, frankly, this council came in and fired a bunch of people and changed the comp plan. And I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But this process is not straight, it's not linear. At the end of the day, we politically have had to make concessions. You can't change everything overnight. I came in and in the first month inherited a comp plan that had been tweaked and modified over the last 20 years to, of course, benefit special interests within this city. And it has taken almost all 4 years that I've been up here to find out where all of the gems for all the development community have been buried in our comp plan and in our LDC. And I'm still finding stuff. So it is a process, and I think that our current folks at the staff level are doing a good job. I agree with some of the sentiments of the mayor. This council is in charge, and we're going to continue moving forward and finding these things. I think CMUV's okay for right now. We've dropped the densities. We've converted things to conditional. With regards to some of the stuff that's right behind, that's getting converted into TCMU, I think it's appropriate, like in the bullet points, after this process occurs, Lewis brought it up, we're going to revisit the TCMU densities and heights to where we can tweak TCMU to say that, well, we did convert stuff and match it to the future land use map, but the TCMU is now something that if they did develop and use that zoning designation, we would be comfortable with it. And that process is ongoing. So my suggestion tonight is to go with the recommended motion on hand, and then we will go through the bullet pointed list that Lewis gave us for the next steps to address each of these items. And so to that end, I'll go ahead and make the recommended motion, which I lost, but
So you don't want to pull out.
Can we interject for 1 second? Because the Community Development Director does recommend taking out 4 and 5.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to find the recommended motion. Yes.
Not in the recommended motion, but he's,
Well, if I just put it as an amendment onto the recommended, it'll be okay?
will be okay?
Okay. I move to approve ordinance 1909 LC on first reading and direct staff to advertise the ordinance for second reading, removing 4 and 5.
Second.
Sound okay?
Yep, thank you, sir. I got a motion, we have a second. Any further comments from?
I have another question, actually.
Go ahead.
Looking at number 8, the post office, did I miss it, or should that be government? or institutional? Because I didn't see that as a permitted use for that number 8.
Yeah, that's an oversight in the comp plan. If we read the language, it is covered as a government use, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So that's why it's not counted in there.
Okay,
All right. Looking both sides. I guess we're ready for a vote, everyone?
Mayor?
Okay, let's go ahead and take it to a vote.
Mayor, if I may.
Oh, go ahead, Ray, I'm
Just for
sorry.
clarification, is this going back to first reading if you remove 4 and 5? Ms. Cobb?
Do you want to take it back?
If you remove 4 and 5, is it going back to first reading? Because it's not going to change the number of parcels? Because it says 468.
Just let me look at the title for 1 second. I have it. Oh, yeah, we did. We called the number. Yeah, we have the number of parcels in the title, so we will re-advertise it.
For first reading?
Yeah.
Can I amend my motion to have staff amend the title, re-advertise, and bring it back to us for first reading at the June 17th meeting?
Yes.
Is that okay with the second?
Okay.
Except, Ray, didn't you say the deadline for June 17th passed?
We already advertised it for second reading for June 17th, so that part is taken care of.
Okay, great.
All right, let's take this to a vote.
Wait, now I'm confused. So are we taking it back to first reading? Okay, but if the ad is out saying second reading...
The ad does not specify second reading, it's just
Okay.
specify public hearing.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
The vote is unanimous. Well done, council. All right, consent agenda is up next.
I'll make that motion, Mayor, to pass both A and B.
Second.
I have a motion to pass consent agenda A and B. Is there any discussion? Seeing none? Unanimous, so moved. Up next, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question. Why are we the only city in probably the whole country that cannot pave or resurface a road in this town without restriping it right after? We have to wait weeks or months after. The last one is Stallman. It's still got cones up and it's been resurfaced for weeks now, and
we were told that we would be getting those restriped about 2 weeks after, and there was some sort of delay, but those should be restriped probably in the next week. It's unfortunate, just kind of a timing issue.
We always have delays, and this one right here was months later before they striped it. So, I mean, can we, if they can't stripe it right after they pave it, can they just wait to pave it? I mean, it seems like there's always issues with striping. I mean, I don't get it. They can pave it, but they can't stripe it.
I understand that. I'll, if you don't mind, I'll get in touch with the contractor tomorrow, and I'll let Mr. Bailey know when that's slated to be striped.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so in your packets tonight, one of the things that we have discussed ad nauseum, and I've mentioned a couple times, is traffic light synchronization, or actually as it's called now, traffic light coordination or signal coordination. It's all the same thing. It's obviously programming the lights a certain way to make the traffic flow as most efficiently as possible. And so I decided to dig into this idea a little bit more, and I wanted to share with you guys and ladies, everyone, what I found in terms of what's being done, how it's been done, and the results. So I really feel like this is an option that we need to sit down with the county with, and potentially even FDOT in terms of getting funding. As you'll see, this is something FDOT is doing, and in fact, back in '05, they did on a very minor scale here in Okaloosa County, just not in Destin. So if you would move on to the next slide. Thanks. So just stating the problem here, it's the obvious. We have a major traffic issue. So one potential solution that most traffic planners actually seek out is signal coordination, almost always as a first line of defense, if you will. So this is just some bullet points on what it is, and again, this is in the packet, so if you actually want to spend the time and read it, because I'm not going to read it to you, I know you all know how to read, but the whole idea here is timing these lights so that you get an efficient flow of traffic through highly congested areas. And what most cities will do, or most small urban areas where there's a large amount of congestion, is they will literally set all the lights in a row for whatever length of mileage that you want, all to green at the same time in both directions. So everyone's flowing, and then they all stop at the same time. And of course, cross traffic goes. Pretty obvious here how it would operate. You can also set it so that different times of days, you have it, longer periods of time that it's green, or shorter periods of time, less light, whatever. It's completely programmable depending on the system that you actually are utilizing. But the strategy literally involves planning with a planner. There's people that do this for a living. We actually have a guy apparently in Okaloosa County that does this, not necessarily to the degree we're going to see, but the knowledge is there, and we do it to some extent, although I would argue that I don't see where Destin's lights are synced at this point. So how does it, oh gosh, that's a lot of information on one slide. Sorry about that. But really, the whole idea here is seeing how much efficiency you can gain by timing and doing them a certain way. And they have shown that literally synchronized lights can have a time savings of nearly 20 and 30% compared to poorly timed lights. And I think we can all kind of agree with that. When you go and you stop at the light, and then you make the next one, you have to stop at that one. If you're stopping at every single light, clearly that's not efficient. If you're not, it's more efficient, and for multiple ways. They talk about, the reduction in carbon in the air and fluorocarbons and all sorts of, chemical stuff, but there's a major benefit to clearly the driver, fuel consumption, etc. So green time is the key. This is what they all refer to, is getting those lights green, all of them green for whatever recommended period of time is determined, because that is what is going to move people through. You'll see later I have some images of several cities and towns where they have instituted this, and in fact they will post signs and say, this is a cruise zone, go 27 and you'll make every light. I mean, literally towns and cities do that. You may have seen them in places. I know Lafayette has them. I've seen them various places. And it's a great way, as you see here, it encourages drivers to travel through and out quickly. Many places, drivers going speed limit sail through without stop and go that seizes up traffic. So again, safe and efficient traffic flow is the goal. So this is a bunch of data that I collected, because as y'all know, I like data and statistics. That's talking about one of the new systems, and we actually are using this in FDOT. We have it in use in Okaloosa County. It's the ITS, Intelligent Traffic Systems. They actually have led to a 50 and 60% reduction in accident-related traffic delays. Rear ends, people banging into others all of a sudden because they're too close and they're stopping at every single light. Outdated traffic signal timing incurs substantial costs to businesses and consumers. So that's a major, major point. You also see here that there's all sorts of different benefits: decreased travel time, increased vehicle speed, decreased delay, decreased number of crashes, and we all know what everyone calls 98 here, bloody 98, because of all the horrible accidents that we have. So this looks like it could be helpful on several counts. So the absence of timed lights and coordinated lights can cause 295 million vehicle hours of delay on major roadways alone, and that's just poorly timed lights. So the mere changing of traffic light coordination and syncing them properly can make a significant amount of difference. Very small signal systems, which is less than 50 signals, and obviously what we would have here in Destin. This is based on the National Signal Report Card. It shows that small towns and cities, small signal systems, actually show the most improvement when you install these systems, because we're the ones that are impacted the most when the lights are not timed properly. So here are the benefits. I've talked about some of them already. It increases traffic handling at intersections. It provides a means of interrupting heavy traffic. There's, as it says, major economy over manual control at intersections, and everything we've talked about already. Some drivers can realize a 30% fuel savings if the synchronized lights reduce the time their cars are having to idle in traffic or at a light. So this is some results that I have found, and they call, one of the systems that they use is ASCT, and they have determined the results through what they call a measure of effectiveness, and they look at savings and costs, both in time and in money. The results are showing here that 61% of street miles in some cities of the study actually had a major signal coordination problem, and when repairing that, reduced delays by 21.2 million hours. So you can see, I mean, these are incredible numbers of what people are able to save just by timing the lights. Again, that's one of the systems being used. LA in 2013, clearly a major city, was the first in the world to synchronize its lights, and travel times dropped by 12% in LA, and that was the first of its kind. It's now all over the place. Fort Collins did a study where they checked everything before, they kept track of all the numbers, then they implemented the system, and then they did all the numbers again to make a comparison. And it showed that vehicle stops were reduced by 19.5% on the weekday. It varied between 11 and 18%. Travel time reduced by 2,591 hours on the weekend, and about 2,200 on the weekend. Sorry, I had that vice versa, but y'all get the picture there. Cost-benefit ratio 60-1 when they retime those lights. And of course, y'all, I'm out of luck trying to read that to you guys, but this is just the same data from the Fort Collins that I highlighted on the previous slide. You can go ahead and go to the next one. So what does a timing plan look like when implemented? And these are some photos. Everything green, everything turns red at the same time, so it's straight through. Interesting, there's all sorts of videos about how when they time lights in New York City, people trying to see who can make the most lights, and there's like some guy that made like 300 and something lights in a row. So yeah, that's a thing apparently. This is some examples of signage that's in different areas that they utilize to tell people what the speed's going to be. So if you go this speed, you're going to make all the lights. Another example. And even more examples. And the one on the left is in Tampa. Signals set for 30. There's another one, signals set for 13 somewhere else. Again, just more signage of different locations, implementing signage showing how you too can sail through the lights. All right, so is FDOT on board? Overwhelmingly yes. They've done this all over the state. They have formed special committees and task force to determine best systems to use, best way to implement it, to train different planners called traffic planners into implementing it. Adaptive signal control technology, which we saw earlier, is one of the most current forms that they're using because it actually will literally determine how many cars are there and reset on its own how to change the lights and time them so people go through. FDOT has thoroughly noted that this works. They've implemented it in multiple places. They're continuing to do it. There's multiple projects right now where they are doing this. This is that system and how it's growing. Right now you see all these different locations in Florida where it's being done. I believe there's one in Panama City. There is one done in Tallahassee. And so this is one of the projects that they're doing currently in Miami, where they are working to synchronize the lights and really improve flow there. This is an example and what the goals are, and you'll see, just like we've been saying, increase throughput where possible without compromising safety. Another one in what they call District 4, which is Martin and Palm Beach, same type of project. They're looking at timing the lights. They're looking at a potential benefit and results of $17.5 million over 3 years, which would be a 50-to-1 benefit to cost ratio. Lee County, another one, same thing. They're looking to expand that system and address traffic issues there. Hillsborough County, yet another one. Again, same thing. They're all on board with trying to increase efficient flow. And then this is the last slide, just some fun facts here. St. Petersburg actually just hired a new traffic signal coordinator because of this exact reason. They have traffic issues and they're getting someone in there, a person on their own payroll to do it as a full-time job. And then Audi, if you're a fan of Audi, they now have incorporated into some of their vehicles this system that GPS automatically taps in to the synchronized light system, and it tells you how much longer the light's going to be red, how much longer it'll be green, so you can adjust your speed accordingly to make it through. So the future is at hand. So I know this was a little wordy. I always provide the references from where I get everything so you can look it up if there's any questions. But the point being that clearly we need to explore this option. I've seen it work in places where I was shocked it worked, major cities. I know others have seen it work in other cities, and all of us know it drives me nuts, and I've done it at night. In winter, when no one's here, stopped at every dang light, and there's no one out there. It's so frustrating. I have seen people at intersections get out of their car because they've waited so long, get up and press the pedestrian crossing thing in hopes of trying to make the signal change, and it does. I don't know if that's that really works or they were lucky, but I've seen people do that before. That's how bad it is, and we all know that. We live here. But I would really like to see us push for working with the county on this and getting someone in. They have done this. In fact, I found when I went to the Okaloosa website and looked at traffic operations, they note that in '05, FDOT proceeded with the development of the Advanced Traffic Control System. It resulted in the installation of 23 devices on signals in Crestview, Niceville, Valpy, and on Route 20. Wouldn't it be nice if we'd had that done here in the busiest tourist spot in the entire county when we really desperately need attention of this sort? So I would like to see us work with the county on that. That's sort of my spiel on that. I do have a couple other things that I wanted to bring forward, but before I do that, what do y'all think? I mean, would y'all like to see us coordinating with them and trying to see if this is something we can implement? I mean, clearly it works. They've done it in other areas of the county. It can't hurt to reach out and try to see what we can look into and at least on the very basic readjust our current synchro, because it's not synchronized by any stretch of the imagination. The funny thing is, I found a city, and this was an article, they deliberately mistimed all their lights because they found it increased commerce. It made people who were stopped and sitting in traffic park and go and visit the shops. So it was a ploy they used to increase shopping. Yeah, so,
I talked with Graham Fountain about this, couple council meetings ago, county commissioners, and he said that our lights in the city limits are synchronized. I don't know if they're synchronized to the technical.
We don't have that system, but
Right.
I actually found the emails I exchanged back in 2014 and early 15, and they sent me some sheets, but clearly I'm not a traffic planner, but they admit that it's not to this extent with every light green and adjusting for flow. It's not that type of system at all.
The only thing I say is that we've installed 5 pedestrian-activated lights in Destin. 2 of those lights are within a couple hundred yards of Stallman, which is one of our major problems. So we're going to have to figure that one out. And I've said it before, you can't fix stupid. I see more people jaywalk anyway than the average number of people at that particular intersection also. So, I mean, I agree. Now, I was told, and I've actually timed it, it's supposed to be every 7 minutes, depending on how many cars are stacked on the out roads for the Highway 98. So it's supposed to be timed out that way with Stallman and most of the lights. 7 minutes of green traffic on 98, and then it actually depends on the number of vehicles that are stacked on the side streets. In particular, at Stallman, 2 or 3 vehicles stacked on the Harbor Walk Village side go through, the light turns yellow right after that. And in that particular case, a couple of weeks ago, one of the shuttle buses that goes to Harbor Walk Village was hit by a truck that ran the red light. And so that's the other problem is getting the traffic to slow down. I think that's what hopefully the 3R project is going to do, is slow the traffic down by making the lanes a little bit narrower, and at least that's what the DOT was telling me. So, but I agree, you know, if we can get all the lights synchronized, but I don't know how we could work the pedestrian activated ones to coordinate with that.
You know, they might do, and I've seen this, because our type of pedestrian crossing is actually part of this intelligent transportation system that they have, is that when all the east-west lights are green for whatever period of time, then they all turn red. The pedestrian then all turn green, all the different ones, and then the cross streets turn green. So it's literally like it's either these or it's either these, and they work with one another. Can you imagine if we had all the lights green until we get to the newly widened, you know, FDOT 3 lanes wide? I feel like that is one way to try to address some of our issue.
When you looked into into this, Ms. Ramswell, did you get is there a cost estimate, or do we have to get some people in here to do that?
Well, the county would, and because apparently we've already been part of that initial project that they did, clearly there's already the know-how and they know that there's interest. I was not able to find any follow-up. This is like literally today's page of the county, and it's referring to the 05 installation. So I'd like to
Councilwoman
talk
Ramswell,
about-
I know
Yeah.
you've got other points, but if you'd like my support, I'll lend it to you. I think probably the best thing to do with this for right now is to ask for an official position from the county, because if they do in fact believe that they've got it synced up and there's nothing left to do, well, then we have to go to the next step and figure out, well, what do we think we need to do in spite of that, or do we think that opinion's accurate? But we got to get them to give us an official opinion. So I would support instructing the city manager, if that's
Yeah,
okay
that
with
sounds
you,
great.
and then we'll get an official opinion from them, and then take the next step after that in the debate.
Mr. Mayor?
And they got a county meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock that you could maybe address them at the podium, Lance, if you got time. I don't know what your schedule is, or Webb, maybe.
Mr.
And
Mayor?
just ask. Go ahead.
I have some information pertaining to this. It's going to be a follow-up. I was going to do a presentation. It's a follow-up from the TPO meeting last week with numbers, so I think you'll be...
Excellent. We'll wait and see what he has to say on it. So moving on to a different subject, and this will be quick. As I was doing all the research and digging into all of this, I noticed that when I went to the city's transportation page, that the links that we have, and I don't know who's in charge of this now, whether it's I don't even know, but it's, and I have the top cut off, but it has listings for different transportation elements, the master pathways plan, It's got concurrency evaluation, all of that. Well, all of the concurrency certificates were file not found, except 2 said blank form. And then of the others, several said file not found or were outdated information. So I think it'd be really helpful to get this updated so our current information is here. And then I also discovered there were several references to a settlement, an interlocal agreement that occurred as a settlement between the city and the county. And it was an agreement to form a committee that would oversee any development and the traffic concurrency that went with it. And we actually still have this written in our comp plan. It's called the UTCMS, and they are required to meet. In fact, the last thing that they were supposed to do was meet every 30 days. They're supposed to evaluate, we're supposed to evaluate them, they're supposed to evaluate us on every development project, and we're supposed to submit a plan every single year. And we are still bound by this agreement, and I couldn't find any indication that any of this has been done in quite some time. There is the ability to render it null and void. You just have to give the other party 180 days notice of intent to not abide by it. But if we're going to abide by it and they're going to abide by it, then I think we need to look into it and either abide by it or don't and get rid of it. So just a concern, and I think it's definitely something we need to look into. It's, again, that's called the UTCMS. And then that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I have, listed under my name, you'll see something I want to talk about. Hopefully I can get some support from the other council members, because I will be making a motion. Sometime back, first of all, the mayor is very good on calling on people. There's not a question about that. And I know we're not going to change item number 3. We're required to have that. But I feel very strongly that if everybody stays this long, call it a consolation prize, call it whatever you want. If they're here this long, they have the right to be heard. I can tell you several years past, at the end of the meeting, there was talk about a lawnmower being broken. And the ball field, something was going on, and there was a gentleman out in the audience, and he stepped up at the podium and says, I've got a lawnmower and I'll take care of it tomorrow. We don't know what the people in the audience may have, that it's not always complaints, it could be something to help us. And I feel we've taken that off, I think sometime last year, and I'd like to reinstate that on our agenda as the last item on there. It doesn't have to be 3 minutes, it could be a shorter period of time, but I think we ought to do it that way. It's not hit and miss by the mayor. He does a good job in trying to identify people, but I've seen several times people have tried to say something and it's not official, so not. So I'd like to make a motion that we reinstate the public comments portion on our agenda, the last item.
We got a motion, we got a second. Any discussion? The only thing I would like to ask is, do you want to do it before the individual council members have their say, or would you have to do it
at the end,
right at the very end before we adjourn?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We got a motion, we got a second. No further discussion, let's vote.
I appreciate it, Councilman.
Ayes have it, so moved.
Okay, and moving on, I've got a bunch, so I want to try to rush through. Thank you, council members. It's good to be able to give our citizens a chance to speak. Could you put that photograph up, please? I just want to alert everybody to this, and I want to ask the city for some suggestions, or I want to give a suggestion. This is becoming the norm right now in Crystal Beach, okay? As we all know, Waste Management does not pick up trash left by trash cans. They only empty the trash cans. And what's happening is we have a coyote problem. Well, the coyotes are having fun with these trash bags as well. Not just coyotes, other animals. They break into these bags, trash is strewn all over the place, and then people like me with Adopt a Street, I'm going along cleaning all this mess up. I'd just like to offer a suggestion. Number one, if we could reach out to Waste Management, I don't know if they have the ability to maybe put a little information notice in the bill, just reminding people that they don't pick up this type thing. And then I think this would, as a suggestion, this might be a crusade that our public information officer could do. maybe put this on our webpage, or just do whatever we could, just an education thing. I realize this is just something else on Joey's plate, okay, and he's got enough. But if we could just start educating people that this is not allowed. That's all I wanted to say about that. I think self-explanatory. Unless,
Mitchell?
Lance, if you have any comment.
I was luckily enough to be privy to most of the contracts that we, our ordinance contracts that we do with Waste Management, and Lance will check into it, but I am almost certain that part of the thing, because I had this same issue several years back, that they are supposed to get out of the trucks and put the trash in the can and dump the trash again. If they're not, because I chased a guy down one day, one of their drivers down, and then I called Waste Management, and my understanding is, as part of our contract ordinances, they are supposed to. If they're not, then we need to have the city manager do something about that, going back and checking that contract.
I can't speak to that. The city manager can follow up on that. On Monday is bulk day. Whether they consider it as bulk or not, I don't know. This picture was a Monday, okay? So they didn't pick it up on bulk day, okay? It was Monday, Tuesday type thing, so that was out there. At any rate, just, we got enough, I got a lot more to go. Just, Lance, if you could just, from a public information thing, put it out there. Maybe Waste Management would help us by putting it out just to alert people that, whatever, and then you can follow up on Waste Management. Okay.
Were those short-term rentals or just general properties?
That was short-term rental.
Didn't we put in a trash something?
Yes, you did, and I followed up on that, and I got some information on that it was so many cans per whatever, but obviously there's not enough cans for this, whatnot. Okay. I did some analysis, okay, and I want to share this with you all. As you all recall, at our last council meeting, we discussed the Crosstown Connector. And the day after that meeting, the Tuesday after that, the Chamber put out, and this is not a negative, this is just some factual analysis. The Chamber put out in their Tuesday wave, they encouraged everybody to email the City Council to thank a couple of council members that voted for it, or the mayor and a council member, and then basically to tell all of us to reconsider and whatnot. And as a result of that, I received 6 emails. It wasn't to me personally, it was addressed to council, so that means all my other council members got it as well. And I did a little analysis, and I just want to share that with you. I took the time to personally answer every single person and give them some information. I gave them a lot of data, and I also included, Dr. Ramswell brought up that information about the 4-lane. And that 4-lane stuff, everybody kind of glazed over it, but that 4-lane is in the PD&E that I have a copy of. Okay, it clearly states about future plans for 4-lane. So I included that in my information to them as well about misinformation, and that I'm waiting to get all the information. And then I took the time and I asked a series of questions to them. And I was very happy that every single person responded back to my email. And I just want to give you a little analysis. First of all, it was 6 people. None of them live in Destin. None of them live in Destin, okay? 5 of the 6 responded, and 1 didn't, as far as do you work in Destin, and 4 of the 5 said, yes, they do work in Destin. I asked them, I wanted to get an idea about the Crosstown Connector that we currently have and the utilization, as far as how much do you use it from start to finish. I asked them, how often do you use the Mountain Drive portion, just Mountain Drive? Nobody answered daily. 1 person answered weekly, once, twice a month, once multiple times each week, and 1 once a week. So nobody did that portion daily. Airport Road, no one answered daily on Airport Road. Weekly, once or twice a week, and several times a week were the answers. How often do you drive on Commons Drive? 5 out of the 6 answered the question, and this is the only question that 1 person said daily. So of the 6 people that responded to my email, 1 person drives on Commons Drive daily. And then finally, I asked them were they a member of the Chamber, and they all said yes. Okay, that's just factual information. Okay, it was brought up in a TDC meeting last week about the silent or the vocal minority. I would like to get more of our citizens to give us input okay, and not necessarily just business people or people from the chamber. And the thing that I found most interesting about my analysis is the information that I gave them about the four-laning, and I gave it to them in black and white, not one person spoke to that. They avoided it. So that's just some analysis that I did on Crosstown Connector. Ms. Bell earlier talked about the Hurricane Town Hall, and yes, I attended that too. I don't think anybody else from Destin was there. It was an extremely informative piece of information. It talked about evacuation routes. It talked about a lot of things. And the one big thing, and hurricanes aren't new to me, I've lived them and worked them and stuff like that, but it was still very informative. And that they talked about forecast. You know, you listen to forecast and you say there's only one hurricane or there's 5 hurricanes. You know what? The people in Mexico Beach only needed one. It's only that one that hits you that counts. So it really doesn't matter what the forecast is. If it hits you, you're in trouble. And I just want to throw out to the city, they did in fact say that they would actually come put on a presentation for us. I don't know if it's something we want to do or not, but if we advertised it, they would be more than willing to put one on. It's part of the Mobile, we're part of the Mobile Weather Bureau system, and I have their contact information, so they would in fact put it on if you want to, just for consideration. I know some people at the EOC, and one of the big things, and we'll be talking more about hurricane things, but one of the big things is information, and how does the city get information out? And as you all know, the Sheriff's Office has the Nixie alert system, and I think everybody kind of got a feeling for that. When the bridge got shut down and everybody started realizing, how do I know? Well, the Sheriff's Office does a good job at letting you know that. All you have to do is subscribe to it. But they also have the Alert Okaloosa, where if there's bad weather, they notify you. I spoke to representatives from the county, and they have said to me, Lance, for information, that they would be more than willing to let the city of Destin use that alert system through the EOC. They could actually fence off, geofence it, and the city of Destin could actually send out individual alerts to all of our homeowners if we wanted, so just for information. Okay. All right, that's the next one. All right. I took part in all of the blessings last week, and I just want to thank everybody for attending. Thank everybody. It was a great opportunity, and I appreciated presenting. I want to stress again and continue to stress how important it is, and I've said it once, but I'm going to say it again. If we don't have a decision maker from FDOT at our workshop's going to be useless, because we need real facts and figures from those people. Last but not least, and this goes with Dr. Ramswell, and I want to tell you, you got an email from Jim Wood. Okay, I attended the TPO meeting last week in Crestview, and it was extremely informative, and specifically about the traffic stuff. I'll give you this, and you all got this as part of your, it was a handout, email a couple of weeks ago about the TPO priorities. Number 1 is area-wide traffic signal. Number 4 is additional traffic management system. And number 8 is intelligent transportation system. Of the top 10, 3 of them have to do with traffic lights. And what I learned is the first portion, the first one, the area-wide traffic signal, is $400,000, and that's for salary and the current equipment utilization. $600,000 is for future equipment for Okaloosa County. So this speaks to, it's not earmarked on where, so that's again a pot of money that we might be able to bag for. And last but not least, $750,000 is earmarked for a transportation management system. That's like in big cities where you go in a room and all the cameras are up there. That's what they're looking to do long term. Okay, so these are things that are on the horizon for that. Former Councilman Wood, I hope y'all read the email, but this is the thing that stunned me at that TPO, and he sent an email about that, and I'll read that little portion about it. But one of the programs, excuse me while I get it. One of the CIS programs is the intersection of Danny Wolfle and 98. And what they talked about, and this is the first time I ever heard this, is they want to do a flyover at that intersection. Now this is a dream, this isn't happening right now. But to that end, former council member Wood sent that email, and basically the takeaway from that is at the TPO meeting, they're looking for input from the city of Destin. Okay? Now, the way they talked about it, it looked like we were negligent and that we hadn't provided it, and that's not the case at all. They're looking for information from us. Okay, so if you read Jim Ward's email, it speaks about that. But they're looking for us, our people, to provide some input to the TPO about that. So that's just FYI. Okay, but I never had heard, obviously, in my short term here, about a flyover there. But they want input from us on that. That's obviously going to be a long-term thing. It's not happening anytime soon, but just an FYI. And let me see, I think I'm just about finished. And that's it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's all, Mayor.
So I just,
Go ahead, Pringle.
the TPO thing, and you talked the traffic signal, and then we said that we'd talk about having Lance or someone
Right.
send something to the county. Can I, at this time, then direct you to talk with the county, Mr. City Manager, or whomever is the proper person, the mayor, whomever, to look into us getting into part of that intelligent traffic system program and synchronizing the lights? Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, one other thing, I'm sorry. I actually met, I spoke to Scott Betterman. He's the county traffic light point of contact, and I'm actually meeting with him this week at their facility in Fort Walton, just to review the stuff, and actually kind of the same thing that Dr. Ramswell talked about. I just want to see this, because I have a lot of questions also. The algorithms, I think, leave a lot to be desired, and I'm just going to do a tour of that facility. Thank you.
Mr. Overdeer. Mr. Marlar.
My question's already been answered, so nothing else.
Mr. Destin.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mr. Morgan.
I move to adjourn.
So moved. No, hold on. I'm just joking. I thought the attorneys were going to bolt for the door, but you're up next, Ms. Kopp.
Well, I'll keep it brief. All of the information I want to share about House Bill 7103 is in your agenda packet. This is a bill that the Florida League of City opposes, basically because it's a further erosion of home rule, and it deals with community development issues. Some local governments have taken the initiative to send a letter to the governor asking him to veto the bill. There's an example of one such letter at the very last page of the packet. If you want to direct us to do a similar letter, we'd be happy to, and it's at your discretion.
I'm totally on board with that, yeah.
Would you
Go
prefer
ahead.
a motion or directive? Okay, I move that the land use attorney and the city attorney draft a letter in opposition to House Bill 7103 and draft a letter seeking the governor to veto.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Seeing no further comments, we'll vote. Unanimous, so moved. Kyle, or Ms. Kopp, are you done? Kyle?
Nothing.
This meeting is adjourned.